here in this territory, you'll find all over in certain areas, you'll find medicine flags. This one is the little medicine flags for those 215 children. And when they developed this monument or memorial to Every Child Matters in the residential school, 215 of these little orange flags were put there, which is the same concept we have when we go to Sundance or go to any other ceremony. We'll hang the flags up in the tree, depending on the color. Could be, but would be north, south, east, and west. They'll hang them there. And for this one specifically, for Every Child Matters, yeah, there should be 215 of these little orange flags. The concept of the orange shirt and the number of the children that were discovered in Kamloops. For us in Cree culture, Nehiyaw culture, Muskwa stands for healing. And on here it says, Mother Bear prays for Earth's healing. Because there's so much happening in this world today. We're talking about the environment and all that other stuff. But specifically for us here, what we're talking about is that intergenerational healing that has to happen. There's a lot of episodes or a lot of situations happening. It can be suicide, youth suicide, and it could be family breakups. And children are still being removed from community and put into non-Indigenous homes. So all those incidents, all that stuff is still happening. So, but we never lose hope. And when we decided to put use the Muskwa as our symbol, we kept in mind what it means to us as Nehiyaw people, what Muskwa is. Muskwa and her two cubs here, she's standing over and looking out for her children, and that's what she's doing. But she's praying for those and praying for healing. Here in our memorial site, we have the medicine wheel here. We have the red, blue, yellow, and white as those concepts of what the medicine wheel means, that everything has to be in balance. We have our social, emotional, mental, and physical self. All those things must be in balance. And for order that to happen, we must go to a higher power, and we must also use our spirits of healing in order to get us there. Around this medicine wheel, there are handprints. Some of the handprints are from actual survivors that are here in community right now. Those that went to the various residential schools in the area. Mine was up in Musqueam. Some went to Blue Quilts. Some went to Wabasca. Some even went to St. Mary's down south. And Edmonton, where Poundmaker now exists, there was a residential school there. But most of us that are here were for the schools in Hobbema. But what is here is the handprints, and we left our handprints here so that when we're no longer here, students could come out here and say, "Oh, look at there's Musham's handprints there." And look, I remember him, and this is what would create dialogue, and it would bring people back to what are those handprints about, and what were they about? It had to do with that reconciliation piece and our stories about what happened in the school. You'll notice though that some of these handprints, these elders are no longer with us. So their children or their grandchildren would have put their name here, but their little finger, their little hands beside that. We have one here which says, I don't know where it is, but Mike Morin, right? Mike Morin, he went to a residential school, but his granddaughters were the ones who put his name there and put their hands in there. So people would remember, and that his legacy, which is memory, would always stay with us.
Before we start, this is a podcast about Canada's Indian residential schools, and it contains descriptions of sexual violence, suicide, and abuse. If you need support, you can find information about where to turn for help at cbc.ca/Kuper Island.
Richard Thomas died in 1966, but the death of a child at a residential school isn't a thing of the past. It travels like ripples over water, touching generations. Even though he never met his Uncle Richard, John Thomas was hurt by his death too. John is Belvey's son. He runs a firewood business from his home at the Halalt First Nation. He's in his late 40s.
Although I didn't go to residential school, it's affected my life in just tremendous ways. Growing up with my mom was extremely difficult because the first 15 years of my life, she was really an active alcoholic. And she didn't do any healing around her experiences at residential school. So a lot of the traumas that she suffered were then inflicted upon, her children in ways. It was difficult, right? It turned me into an alcoholic.
Belvey worked at a school as a teacher's aide, but the pain she suffered at Kuper Island clouded the rest of her life. She married a non-native, John's father. He was extremely abusive. Belvey drank a lot. She gambled. It all had a major impact on John. His relationship with his mom is strained.
Here's something that's really difficult for me is because, my mom gets insanely abused by these nuns and priests, and okay, so that's somebody that's outside the family that's messing with you and causing major trauma. The problem for people for my generation is we get messed up by the people that are supposed to be nurturing us. Our own parents are the ones that are mangling us.
He's been sober 15 years, done a lot of therapy. Part of his healing meant understanding the past and unpacking the stories about Richard.
My mom would let things out when she was drinking, and I heard that he didn't make it back from Kuper Island. She would talk about my late Uncle Richard. It was probably one of the most traumatic things. I couldn't believe what I was hearing when I heard it, that this happened in Canada.
Then John told me a story I'd heard over and over since we first started looking into this, about what the priests and nuns did after Richard was found hanging.
What was really disturbing was the fact that those priests had made every child in the school walk through the gym and look at him before they cut him down. I mean, just how disturbing is that? There's people alive today still that remember going through that gym and seeing him hanging there. I mean, it's just so disturbing. When I would be partying on the reserve, I would talk to some of the older people to find out if anybody remembered that, and I came across people that had to walk through that gym. It's not a story, that's the truth.
What was it like to have people tell you that?
Well, it's fuel for alcoholism, It's more fuel for me, right? That these kind of things would happen to my family.
What once fueled John's demons is now fueling his desire for truth and justice, and he's on the same journey we are, trying to find out what really happened to Richard on that June night back in 1966. I'm Duncan McCue, and this is Kuper Island, Episode 4, What Happened to Richard? When John started searching for answers about Richard's life and death, he didn't want to ask his mom. It was too triggering for both of them. He didn't need more of that. Instead, he turned to social media and found plenty of upsetting stories about his late uncle. He also heard a rumor that Richard was buried in an unmarked grave in Penelakut, so John decided to create a memorial. That's when he figured out Richard has a proper grave. in the Halaalt First Nation graveyard.
He's buried right down the street from me here. And I found out that they got late Uncle Richard over here to Halaalt and buried him in our family graveyard. It was relieving. It was very relieving. Just to know that he was here in Halaalt.
That he's here.
Yeah.
He's home.
Yep. Yeah, he's not in an unmarked grave on Kuper Island.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's not take anything away from the children that are there. This situation is unique that Richard was brought here and buried properly. But, there's a bunch that weren't, right?
I asked John if it matters to him that there's a new statutory holiday to recognize truth and reconciliation. Canadians from coast to coast to coast marked it by wearing orange, a color that's come to symbolize the suffering of survivors.
I've lived 48 years of this. I don't need a day to reflect on residential school. It's been a major part of my life.
Yeah. Understood.
But the rest of the country, if you feel good putting on an orange shirt, then, get on board. Show some support. If it warms your heart to be a part of, then great.
So what does need to be done?
Let's get some of these priests in jail. Let's lock them up. Show us that you care enough to charge these people. Come on, Canada.
They're old. Most of
Who
them are dead.
cares? Who cares how old they are? Get them behind bars. Show Canada that First Nations people are worthy of a bit of justice. Right? We're worth that. My Uncle Richard is worth that.
John wants Richard to be remembered for more than the ugliness of his death. One of the first things he and Belvy told us was that Richard loved writing. They said there's an old book out there somewhere with his stories in it, but no one had a copy.
Would you like to see the book that Richard's writings are in?
Yeah. What, did you found it? No way. I read it when I was a little kid. My mom said, "Oh, this is your late uncle," and I read a story about a deer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we went, both your mom and you were talking about it, and we were like, what is this? So we went and found it.
How did you find it?
It was in the Vancouver Public Library.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's read it right now. That'd be great.
The book is called Tales from the Longhouse. It's a collection of legends written by First Nations children from Vancouver Island, who gathered the stories from elders. It's a bit of a dusty relic, published back in 1973. Richard tells 3 stories in it. One is the tale of a boy turned into a deer. Another is about a girl transformed into a crow. The last one is the origin story of his people, the Halaalt tribe.
Yeah.
There's the book.
Yeah, so that's... Wow. I remember Richard Thomas, age 14, grade 7, Kuper Island Residential School. The Halaalt tribe. Richard Thomas. This is told by his father, my late grandfather, Stan Thomas. Once, many, many moons ago, there was a very kind man. He lived in Saanich for a long time all by himself. He had not seen another person since his father had died of some kind of sickness. His mother had died a few hours after he was born. From the time that he was only 10 years old, he knew how to hunt, carve, make weapons to kill animals, and how to make shelters for himself while out hunting. He knew how every animal looked and smelled, but he never knew what a woman looked like. One day while out hunting, he saw a strange creature walking around with 2 legs and 2 arms.
According to the legend, the hunter ends up trapping the creature and discovers it's a woman.
The man decided to call his woman Halaalt, after a beautiful fish that he had one day seen his father catch, because he thought that she too was beautiful. She decided to call him Mishkin. When they were very old, they had many grandchildren. These young people wanted to call themselves the Mishkins, but he said before he died, "This is Halaalt's tribe." There is still a tribe called Halaalt. I know this because I am one. Awesome.
What do you think of that?
Well, it's just amazing, right? It's just so heartwarming.
Heartwarming. Why?
Well, because it's a piece of my uncle, right?
Yeah.
It's a piece of my late uncle that, was killed, right?
Yes.
And here's a piece of him that's still alive. Yeah, that's awesome. And to be like, we're in Halaalt. This is Halaalt, right? I live here. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I couldn't believe, that we found his writing.
Right?
Because it's like he's talking to us, right? Like,
Yeah. He's guiding you.
Maybe.
Absolutely.
I hadn't
What
thought about
else?
it that way.
Right? You're working for him. He's guiding you.
I like that.
Like, there's so much more going on than what we see, right?
I've been with enough traditional people to, I believe strongly
Okay,
in
good.
spirits and that the ancestors are talking to us.
Yeah, there's a good chance Richard's sitting here right now with us, right?
But I loved reading his words just because it gave me a connection to him.
Yeah.
Because at first we just heard this story, right, about this boy that committed suicide. That was all we knew. And then now we're starting to learn more about him. But the other thing that I thought was super cool was just that he was like, he got the story from your grandpa, and then he says, like, I'm halalt. Like, this is who I am.
right?
I am one, which is pretty cool.
There's got to be some kind of legacy for my late uncle Richard Thomas. You know, it's just like the way that you die can be your legacy, which just sucks in this case, because there's so much more to him than his death. Is a bright part of him that we get to share, right? I just can't thank you enough for bringing that.
We had already asked Belvie and her partner Ken to take us to her brother's grave. Now it feels even more important to pay our respects.
Okay, I'll see you guys there.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Okay. What time is it now? 2:41. We usually don't go to the graveyard after 4 or 4.
3.
3? Oh.
The Hulkaminam have customs about not disturbing the ancestors after a certain time of day, so we're sort of racing to get there.
Hi, thank you.
It's a small, tidy graveyard. Thank you for bringing us here.
Okay. Hard to see.
It's all covered up with leaves.
Yeah.
It's that time of year.
No, I think it's on this side, Hunt. I think it's these ones here.
Ken is sweeping aside all the autumn leaves. Then he finds it, a modest brass plaque set in the ground. That's Richard?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there. He pulled aside the leaves.
Richard Murphy Allen Thomas M.A. Thomas. Dear to our hearts.
Does it make you feel good that he's here in the graveyard, Richard?
Better than being in some graveyard out in Penellicut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least he came home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We were able to see him after, you know.
It's in our tradition to put tobacco down, so I'm just going to put some tobacco down for Richard to let him know why we're here and to say thank you. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah.
What's it like coming here?
It's hard, you know, like, what's hard about it is seeing the names of my brothers and sisters on so many crosses and stuff. And that's my other brother, Arnold. He was just younger than Richard. Well, Brian was younger, but Richard and Arnold.
To Belvie, the early deaths of her brothers and sisters often point back to the trauma they experienced at the residential school. And it all started with Richard.
I've never actually put that together, that Richard was the first really big tragedy in your family.
Yeah, Richard was the first that we all just, you know, it seemed like it just broke us all. And it was like every 2 years we were losing somebody after that. Because, you know, like after Richard passed away, we just all started drinking and, you know, we just wanted to try and forget about it, you know, sort of thing. And we were young, we were all abused at the schools and forget everything, you know, everything. I'm 73 years old and I just want to live my life in peace. And the only thing that would really give me a lot of peace is finding out what happened to Richard. He didn't commit suicide. I know that in my heart. So if we can find out what happened to him, I would feel a whole lot better. I mean, he was my friend, my brother. You just don't get over those kind of things. And when somebody tells you that he did wrong to himself, it's not a happy place to stay.
As this week comes to an end, Truth and Reconciliation does not. We all have a role to play in Truth and Reconciliation. The learning and dialogue you participated in this week is only a small part of your journey. Please don't let it end here. This week was about fostering truth, reconciliation, and healing, and ensuring that we always remember the children.